So here on the eve of MLK Day and Inauguration Day, I'd like to share with you some reflections that are inspired by the book Confidence, Holding Your Seat Through Life's Eight Worldly Winds. It's by the meditation teacher Ethan Nichtern. Over the years, I've consistently found Nichtern to be an accessible and insightful Dharma teacher, as well as a savvy and inspiring activist for social justice. Some of you may recall that we've focused on Nichtern's work in a Sunday service one previous time, drawing on his delightful book, The Dharma of the Princess Bride, what the coolest fairy tale of our time can teach us about Buddhism and relationships. For anyone interested, that sermon is available in our sermon archive. And I know at least one of our many UU Buddhist groups that meet throughout the week studied his first book titled The Road Home, a contemporary exploration of the Buddhist path. That's a good introductory book if you're interested. Shifting back to Nichtern's latest book, his focus this time is one of the many Buddhist lists. If you start to get into Buddhism, you'll know that Buddhism has a whole lot of lists of things. And specifically, he's focused on the eight worldly winds, also known as the eight traps of hope and fear. They are gain and loss, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, fame and disrepute or disgrace. If you were tuned in last Sunday, we talked about the central Buddhist teaching of impermanence, that reality is in this constant state of flow, flux, and change. If you've heard me say before, part of what myself and many others have found through meditating, and also what science tells us, is that reality is process and relationship all the way down. Process and relationship all the way down. And these eight worldly winds give us some of the major flavors of impermanence as we humans experience them. There can never be gain or success without eventually experiencing loss and failure. Too much pleasure becomes painful, and pretty much any pleasure has diminishing marginal returns. That first bite is never as pleasurable as the second, third, fourth, etc. Likewise, praise and blame or criticism, fame and disgrace or insignificance, they blow in and out of our lives, often in capricious and unpredictable ways. These eight winds become traps of hope and fear if we try to cling too tightly to either side of the scale. Buddhism challenges us to directly confront the changing wind-like nature of reality and to respond as skillfully, as wisely, as compassionately, and generously as we can in each present moment. And as we also considered last week, you cannot stop these waves of change. You can't stop the winds from blowing, but you can learn to surf. And one of the reasons that Nichtern wanted to write a book about navigating the eight worldly winds is that he has experienced their buffeting in his own life and has had to learn to surf some of the big waves that life throws at us sometimes. In 2016, the fashion section of the New York Times ran a feature article titled Practicing the Perfections of Meditation and Love about his wedding. And it was officiated by the renowned meditation teacher Sharon Salzberg. Few of us have had our wedding featured on in the New York Times as a cover story of a section, much less had it called Practicing the Perfections of Meditation and Love. No pressure, right? Can you feel those winds blowing of fame, pleasure, praise, and fame? But 6 years later, in 2022, they divorced. And he shares honestly in the book about how difficult that was, especially as he himself is a child of divorce, and he shares some about that, even as he and his ex-wife now seek to begin again as co-parents and friends. In 2018, in the early years of his marriage, he also had to navigate a very public scandal about the leader of the meditation community that his parents had raised him in and that he was a major teacher in. His full-time profession is meditation teacher, so it was all like wrapped up together. And that scandal was also a major headline in the New York Times. Can you feel those earlier winds of promise shifting in the direction of loss, pain, blame, and disgrace? As you can see, his latest book on holding your seat through life's 8 worldly winds, it's not theoretical. It is born out of the crucible of his lived experience. And I know many of us are experiencing these 8 worldly winds buffeting us right now. So let me share a little more about the Buddhist practice of holding your seat. When I did my own meditation teacher training, this practice of holding your seat was the focus of one of our many lessons. As a longtime meditator, I was accustomed, as many of you have maybe heard before, if you've gone to a meditation class, this basic instruction of take your seat, meaning assume a meditation posture. Like if I were doing that right now, I might sit up a little straighter and put my feet flatter on the floor in a position that you can be relaxed yet alert, upright but not uptight. I'll never forget the meditation teacher Reggie Ray, who I learned so much from. He would always say, I just can't overemphasize how important it is in meditation to relax your body and to relax your expectations. Relax your body and relax your expectations. There's a lot more to say about that. As a side note, let me also mention while I'm at it, let me clarify right now, there's a common misunderstanding that sitting on a meditation cushion is the best way to meditate. There are actually 4 classical ways that go all the way back of how to meditate: sitting, walking, standing, and lying down flat on your back. Any of them can be equally effective depending on the circumstances and the needs of your body, and sitting in a chair can be equally fruitful as sitting on a cushion. So regardless of your exact posture, there's a deeper meaning to take your seat or hold your seat that Ethan and others are getting at. And that was what we were being invited to own as meditation teachers. Holding your seat, it's about taking up space with confidence, not arrogance. It's about owning your capabilities without self-diminishment. It's about our emphasis on inherent worth and dignity of every person. So on the eve of both Inauguration Day and MLK Day, which I think is feeling really dissonant for a lot of us, and I'll say more about that tomorrow. Uh, uh, the meeting's canceled, but I'll still get something to you. Many of us are anticipating not the realization of Dr. King's dream, but many coming actions that he no doubt would have called a nightmare. We're bracing ourselves for the gale force winds of chaos, of gaslighting and cruelty that have already begun to blow. In the days to come, learning to better hold your seat can be a helpful practice of preparing ourselves to respond as skillfully, as wisely, as generously and compassionately as we are able, no matter what ends up coming our way. Now, that being said, I very much recognize that there are unequal power dynamics at play, and the challenge of holding your seat can vary greatly depending on the person and the situation. And in times when I'm finding it difficult to hold my seat, especially when working for peace and justice, I try to remember that old adage from Shirley Chisholm, who in 1968 became the first Black woman to be elected to US Congress. This is probably the most famous quote that she ever said. It goes like this: if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. So let me also say just a little bit more about the Buddhist approach to holding your seat no matter what sort of wind is blowing your way. One significant example is from the neuroscientist Dr. Richard Davidson, who is at the University of Wisconsin. One of his experiments studied how meditation can change your response to pain. Now, I don't know about you, but having a bunch of nodules attached to my face, that just really puts me in the mood to meditate. But he was doing this to track brain activity over a 30-second period. The first 10 seconds monitored the anticipation of pain. The second 10 seconds monitored the direct experience of pain. And the third 10 seconds monitored the recollection of pain. So as I describe the experiment in more detail in the next few moments, consider how would you feel inside if you were the test subject, like that person you saw with the stuff all over their face. So the beginning of the 30 seconds, you were told a painful burning sensation will soon begin. How would you respond? You might understandably be thinking, that sounds terrible. And then starting at the 10-second mark, you actually experience an almost excruciating heat administered to your skin, designed not to cause any permanent damage, but it is designed to hurt like hell while it is happening. And then for the final 10 seconds after the heat ends, your pain receptors continue to be monitored. The results were fascinating. I'll give you two representative examples about people at the two extremes. So, on one end of the spectrum, for people with little to no experience of meditation, the whole 30 seconds was hard. It was filled with anxiety and bracing against the pain that was to come because that anxiety anticipation activated their pain receptors prematurely. The middle 10 seconds of pain were, of course, very unpleasant. And then the final 10 seconds, though, was dominated by reliving how terrible the experience had been. For this group, the actual experience of excruciating heat was only slightly more painful than the anticipation and reflection. So that last sentence was really important, so I'm going to repeat it. For this group of non-meditators, the actual middle 10 seconds, the actual experience of excruciating heat was only slightly more painful than the anticipation and the reflection. So keep that in mind. At the other end of the spectrum, here's what happened when that same process was done to Yangye Mingyur Rinpoche, who's a master of the Karma Kagyu and Nyingma lineages of Tibetan Buddhism. As a side note, I am a huge fan of his book that's titled In Love with the World, A Monk's Journey of Living and Dying. I'll actually share that in the chat if any of you want to look that up. That book was one of the top 10 best books that I read in 2019, the year it was published. It's really phenomenal. There's also a blurb on the cover in which Pema Chodron calls this book one of the most inspiring books I have ever read. And that each of her many books are one of the most inspiring books I've ever read, that's a pretty high compliment. So for Mingyur Rinpoche, during the first 10 seconds, he was in the present moment. Since he wasn't anticipating what was to come, his pain receptors were practically inactive. He didn't brace against a hypothetical future experience the way that control group did, the way most of us do. During the final 10 seconds, his pain receptor activity was also very low because he didn't ruminate on the event at all. Again, he was in the present moment, in the before it happened, when it was happening, and then after it happened. So during the extreme heat, though, his pain receptors actually spiked higher than the control group of non-meditators because he was so open to that present moment. He did experience more pain during that middle 10 seconds, but he didn't waste time anticipating what may or may not happen. And then he allowed the experience to blow through him so fully that he didn't cling to it afterwards or spend a lot of time perseverating about it. Remember that for non-meditators on the other end of the scale, that whole 30 seconds was terrible. Their actual experience of the excruciating heat was only slightly more painful than the anticipation and the reflection. It was all bad. So here's the thing. Here's why this matters. We find ourselves this morning on the eve of both MLK Day and Inauguration Day. For better and very much for worse, this is happening. Our challenge is to hold our seat no matter what happens, no matter which of the 8 worldly winds begin to blow. And keep in mind, a lot of unexpected and unplanned things are going to happen too in the next coming years. As with the experiment we considered earlier, our invitation is to notice, when am I spending too much time worrying about things that may or may not even actually happen, or may play out in very different ways than anyone anticipates? We're also invited to notice, when am I spending too much time replaying the tapes on what has happened instead of asking ourselves, okay, that happened. What's the next right thing to do? Holding our seat, being more fully present and alive right here and now in the arising and passing away of each present moment, however pleasurable, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral that situation is, and then responding as skillfully, wisely, compassionately, and generously as we are able, individually and collectively. Let me also hasten to add that meditation does not have to be your path toward cultivating that capacity within yourself. Some of you may be more drawn to music or art, others to some sort of movement or sport. What you're looking for is any practice that puts you more fully in the flow of the present moment and allows you to process and let go of whatever comes, rather than bracing, clinging, or fixating. From another angle, we might say that at the intersection of MLK Day and Inauguration Day, Dr. King's legacy invites us to do as he did, to go more deeply into the spiritual path or paths of our choosing in ways that whatever helps us show up in the work for justice and self-care in ways that are grounded, wise, and transformative for all, including ourselves. For now, as we continue to process how am I, how am you, how am we called to show up, I want to invite you to hear a final poem. It was published just last year, and it's titled, When It Really Is Just the Wind and Not a Furious Vexation. It's by Kyle Trand Myrie. It explores the question of where will our society go from here? Similar to Dr. King's famous question of whether in the years to come will we choose chaos or community. The poem goes like this. The year I was born, the Soviet Union's early warning radar system malfunctioned. It reported 5 intercontinental ballistic missiles in flight, a preemptive nuclear strike. You may have heard this story, how a single lieutenant dismissed the signal as the false alarm that it was. But had he made a different call in that moment? Had he seen those 5 ghost fingers as a fist, a mushroom cloud, the most dangerous cliche? You know, I've come to hold it in my hands on my 40th birthday, and it's become a bouquet. 1,000 stems leading to 1,000 worlds in which cooler heads did not prevail. To 1,000 alternate universe versions of me, born in the year of the apocalypse. I see myself dead via radiation poisoning, dead via the shutdown of the supply chain, the failure of the water system, the reemergence of previously preventable diseases. Dead, I'll confess, in such manly ways. Via an unlucky fall in a fist fight over nothing. Via a scratch ignored and infected. I plucked petals looking for a version of me who survives, hoping to find that, leather jacket, black motorcycle, katana, sword strapped to my back version of myself, that warrior poet, lone vessel of vengeance, keeping the wasteland's unending tide of razor-clawed mutants at bay version of me. All these dead worlds, and that version of me, he isn't out there. All these versions of who I imagine I could have been, and there's just not a single hero, folk, super, anti, or otherwise. In one life, I wore a suit of armor and drowned in a river. In one life, I hoarded food and then I choked on it. In one life, the basement was so full of boxes of bullets, but then a tornado came and I had nowhere to go, no shelter. I emptied clip after clip into the wind. All these dead worlds, and they all tell the same stories. Which is not to say that I never survive. It's just that my survival, in every reality where my survival is possible, it never belongs to me. I see myself at age 40. But I'm not a dual-wielding bandit warlord. I'm just a neighbor, sitting in endless community meetings. And how many of our ancestors have already taught us, even after the world ends, there is work to do. And I see myself in that work. I'm not the leader, not a lone wolf. I'm just another part of the pack. Because in every universe in which I am alive, it is because of other people. And I don't always like them, but I love them. In every universe in which I am alive, it is less because I could fight and more because I could forgive, because I could cooperate, because I could apologize, because I could dance, because I could grow pumpkins in my backyard and leave them at my neighbor's door, asking for nothing in return. In every universe in which I am alive, I'm holding a first aid kit, a solar panel, and a sleeping cat. Never a rusty battle axe or rocket launcher. Sure, maybe sometimes a chainsaw, but it's only for firewood. I am holding a cooking pot, a teddy bear, a photo album, a basketball, a bouquet of flowers. Because survival is not a fortress, it's a garden. Survival is not a siren, it's a symphony. And yeah, we fight for it sometimes, but survival is not the fight. Survival is the healing after, the soft hum of someone you trust applying the bandage and the feeling of falling asleep in a safe place. I want to invite you to hear that closing stanza once more. Survival is not a fortress. That's the lie the billionaires tell us at our expense. Survival is a garden. Survival is not a siren, it's a symphony. And yeah, we fight for it sometimes, but survival is not the fight, it's the healing after. The soft hum of someone you trust applying the bandage and the feeling of falling asleep in a safe place. So I'm grateful to be on that journey with all of you of planting gardens, building symphonies, fighting when we must, and helping one another heal after, and always seeking to co-create with one another, beloved community. So in that spirit, in a few moments, we're going to hear, and you can sing along at home as you like, our hymn number 1031, Filled with Loving Kindness. And notice, as I usually point out, that pronoun shifts as we go through the three verses. It starts with I. So start by singing this song for yourself. And notice what part of you needs to hear this. Start by taking care of ourselves. Start by putting your oxygen mask on first. And then it shifts to you. And as you hear that this morning, notice, who is that you for you? Do you need to offer that you to a friend, to a loved one, to someone in need? Do you need to maybe up the ante and offer that you to maybe an enemy that you know is miserable? So just who's that you for you this morning? And then finally to we, offering these words of loving kindness to all sentient beings. For now, as we prepare to go into the rest of this day and into the week to come, may you continue your journey with love. And I don't think you can see my stole, but side with love. Continue your journey with love. Care for one another. Care for this one earth. Do justice and make peace in all the ways that you're able. And as you go, whatever taste or touch you've had in this time and place, whatever glimpse you've had of just even a little more hope or love or peace or joy, that goes with you into the world. We are different for having spent this time together. And as I've been kind of adding to the benediction lately, even in this hard time, continue to look for all that remains good and true and beautiful. May you live boldly. May you live with thanksgiving. May you go in peace. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Be well.